Thanks for having me. I'm kind of a soft talker, so if you can't hear me, just yell at me, it's fine. As Dawn said, I write for the Wall Street Journal a lot. I have covered VR for Popular Science, Elle, The Guardian, Wall Street Journal, and I've been kind of a VR nerd for a long time, so I was excited when these guys opened up. And I am joined by 5 local investors. I'm going to just let you guys introduce yourselves, because you're probably better at it than I am.
Okay. I'm Greg Birkin. I'm a serial entrepreneur, not a serial killer, a serial entrepreneur. And I started one of the very first Apple Macintosh software companies 35 years ago. It's so long ago that I feel very old. But I also was a technology evangelist at Intel for about 7 years. And my experience with VR is more recent. I've sort of immersed myself in it, to borrow the term. I have a Rift. I have the Microsoft HoloLens. You haven't seen it. Maybe I can demonstrate it later. It's incredible. Changes the whole thing. And you know, I came from Intel Corp, which, you know, we all know about Moore's Law, doubling of performance every year and the shrinking of the cost. That's what this is, right? Display technology, processor technology, graphics technology, everything combined in one system. And we're seeing advancements because of Moore's Law and semiconductor development and many things like that. And so we saw VR very early on. It's just the packaging and the delivery and all of the things that you have today make it much more of a palatable experience. And we were talking before about, you know, glasses and the lack of those and that kind of thing. It is happening at a very fast pace, and hopefully I'll show you the HoloLens later. You know, my company is called Concours Ventures. Concours from the French, meaning competitive ventures. We look at angel investments in startups in the Valley. We haven't done a lot in the VR space, but we're looking at it very closely. So that's my background.
Thanks, Rick. My name is John Ritchie. I'm the founder and the executive director of a small group in Palo Alto called U.S. Angel Investors. I was an entrepreneur. I'm no longer an entrepreneur. I'm thinking about getting back to the game. And I'm also a member of a couple of other groups. One is called Eretsu Forum, which is the largest angel investor group in the country. And another one is called Harvard Angels for short, Harvard Business School Alumni Angels. I'm not into the virtual reality game, but you know, John invited me. I'm looking at it. We're looking at it. We see some deals. We have not really figured it all out yet. So you know, I'm glad that Craig is bullish, and I hope to learn from him.
Brady Bookmeyer. I guess I'm here representing Sacramento Angels. And I have another kind of representation that I sit on the board of Doctors Without Borders, on the international board as treasurer. And I can talk a little bit because there's a segue between VR and what we're doing within that organization. So I've made one investment in a VR company, Space VR. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. We'll see if they run out of money or they actually make something of it. But it was, my background is aerospace engineering. Spent a lot of time on Wall Street, so I'm a Wall Street refuge. Moved out to California and got into angel investing. But the opportunity to kind of tie that investment was kind of my real passion of space and interest in that. Kind of a unique opportunity.
So I'm Lokesh Sikaria. I'm with Moneta Ventures. We are a VC based out of Folsom. Moneta Ventures currently is the largest technology VC in the region. So we are very excited to what John started here, and we're looking for deals and things that come out of here. For the fund, we basically have about 65 million under management between our two funds, and we focus on late seed, early Series A kind of companies. So typically, you've gone through the friends and family kind of rounds, and then you're looking for your first institutional investor. That's when we would typically come in. And then for people who have difficulty with Indian names, I have a very simple way to remember mine. So you think of low in cash and you think of low cash. Go for it.
65 million does not sound like low
No, no,
cash. My name is Don. I run two things. The first one, I run an angel group for virtual reality out in San Francisco. We have about 50 members. And we've done 8 virtual reality deals this year, 9 if we don't get elbowed out of this round, but fingers crossed. Then I'm also starting a venture group for virtual reality, which basically means very similar to an angel group, how we have a community, we meet once a month and we do deals and I invest out of a fund and then they have the option to co-invest with us. We'll be starting a venture fund and working with a number of venture capital funds to push forward the movement of investing into virtual reality. And that's kind of what I'm all about, is investing into virtual reality and funding the industry.
Okay, so I'm curious to hear from each of you just what interests you most about 3D VR and where, I guess, where you see the most potential as an investor. Is it just like, well, yeah, you're probably the best qualified to answer that. But, like,
Definitely not. But I think, I mean, I'd love to hear. I think it's different to everybody, but the high level, my thought on it is that VR allows you to go somewhere mentally before you're there physically. And so VR has been around since the visualization techniques, back whenever that was started, probably thousands of years ago. But you could really only get like maybe 10% of what actual reality would be. And now you can get close to like 70% of what actual reality would be when you're going to a headset. And so the amount of things that unlocks for human potential as far as visualizing and then achieving in the real world is really what excites me.
And I would say that from our perspective, when we look at deals, we want to look at things that one have commercial application, things that are not platform dependent, so more platform agnostic. You know, whether it's Oculus or HTC, it's not dependent on one platform because who knows who wins out in these platform wars. And to us, we are always looking for deals that have the ability to stand on their own 2 feet. We are based in the Sacramento region. We don't have a big ecosystem of a lot of VCs who can follow on our rounds. So when you're looking for a round of investment and you're saying, well, I'll need 3 more rounds before I make any money, that's usually not us, right? So.
I'd say initially it's finding, it's much like any other startup. You try and solve a pain point or a problem that you see, you try and do it more efficiently in your gadget, which is a service. I see the kind of the initial businesses that will emerge to be profitable ones early on are basically just like any other software business where you're trying to solve a pain point problem that somebody else has, and you're using these as tools. I think I'm very bullish on the sector. I think there'll be a lot of trial and error. There'll be a lot of losers in the beginning, but I think long term these technologies will change everything. We were having the conversation after the last panel. I would be willing to bet within 10 years you see a total deconstruction of the cell phone. And I don't think it's that far off. Where you take the battery pack and the transponder and the receiver part of it, you shrink that down to the smallest level, the screen becomes the AR goggle, and you're off to the races. I spend a lot of my life on airplanes, unfortunately, and I realize how clunky your cell phone and your laptop are when you're trying to be mobile, and this would solve a number of problems.
Yeah, so as I said, we're looking at some VR deals and we're still trying to figure it out. We all style, it's like when we look at a deal, we want to show me how I can make money within a decent amount of time. And we don't see a lot of stuff that we really understand because the field is moving and moving fast. There's platforms out there, but God knows if the big guys are going to let you play in that game. There's a whole gaming and entertainment aspect, and there's part of that we don't really feel comfortable with. Anything that's kind of like game driven is kind of a hit driven business, and we've tried, and we just don't have the knowledge and capacity to get into games. Now, tools is a different, it's a different business. If we saw a deal that, it's kind of, instead of digging for gold, you sell shovels, you sell tools to the guys who want to do VR, take some games and VR them kind of thing. That would be interesting to us. Outside of games and entertainment, we still try to figure out where the applications are going to be, and kind of look at, the hardware we think is still not there in terms of moving around. We can see static or quasi-static application in entertainment offices, but as I was telling Greg, walking down New York, Fifth Avenue with this thing on some people believe it's in it, some people don't. We still kind of like on a holding pattern, trying to figure out where it's going to happen.
When I first got my Oculus Rift, I was so excited, and I started to download every application and noticed that the ranges were from free to up to $50, and then started to play with every one. I get a headache, I start to sweat, I start to stay up later and later. I get so immersed in this that wow, I'm ODing on VR quickly. And so I said, I've got to kind of step back. And then the first thing that worried me was Oculus sent out an update, and it had to restart my computer. Half of the applications were interrupted and didn't work because of the video subsystem was not, the driver or something was not being resolved. And so I can see where it's still sort of go back to the early days of PC gaming when we all had trouble installing things and this kind of stuff. And so that's not a mainstream thing yet. And you really have to be sort of not just technically proficient, but doggedly into it to really overcome those problems and stuff. And the thing about the Rift is that it's tethered, with an HDMI cable. You can't go very far. It has the sensor. You can stand up. Amazing experience, very immersive. But all of a sudden, I got the HoloLens, and it's now I can walk around this room. And the difference between the HoloLens, if you haven't seen this, is that this thing has ultrasonic scanners. It's scanning this room, and with certain applications, you can make everything that's in your world interact with what's here. And that's a game changer, because it'll know where that chair is and it can place things. There's an application called Blocks. The blocks fall down and drop onto the chair, and then they actually hit the top of the chair and then bounce off. And it's like, whoa, incredible. And there's another one we were talking about a little bit. Ed, I think, referred to it, and I'm hoping I can demonstrate it later. It's called Fragments. It's from a French studio. Microsoft paid for it. And it's a crime scene investigation that takes place right here in the room. It scans the room, and then you'll see the recreation of the crime, and then you are your own CSI person. You're looking for clues, and you have to solve that. It's again, mind-blowing. And so on the content side, there's a lot of really, really interesting stuff going on, but also on the technology side, Magic Leap and a lot of these things that are helping to understand gestures and other ways of interacting with this. This thing does voice using Cortana. It does gesturing, and there's a whole new language for gesturing. To pull up a menu, it's called blooming. This is a bloom, okay, to get your menu to pull up. And I can place, there's a full Windows computer in here that's wireless, just like you'd interact, and some people say that's bad, but in some ways that's good if you're a Windows developer, but you can get up to speed very quickly if you use Unity and so on and so forth. But I can place menus all along the walls in here and basically have my own virtual desktop. It's pretty mind-blowing. So if you get a chance, maybe I can show it later. I can't put this on everybody's head, but there is an application to show it on the screen, so I'll try to do that later. So anyway.
This is more of a general investing question, but I'm curious to have you guys kind of just explain for the room the difference between an individual angel and how he or she would invest versus a group versus an early stage venture fund, and what sorts of different things you're looking for at each of those stages. Kind of investing 101.
Sure, I'll take this.
Yeah.
So, when you look at the key differences between them, the first stage, obviously, is the angel groups, right? And then comes the VCs. The angel groups typically don't lead, or the angels, individual angels don't necessarily lead the deals. Terms are set up, one key investor or angel takes on that, and then every other angel just follows those terms. Typically, they won't do large follow-on rounds. That's the other big difference. Seed rounds where they would participate are typically less than $2 million. Early stage VCs who are investing in Series A would typically invest in $2 to $7 million Series A kind of rounds. And I would say that the process with the VCs is more structured and therefore slower. You might be able to raise money more quickly with angels. Angels take more risk, and they, proportionately the reward is higher with angel investing. So I would say those might be the biggest differences. The VCs might have more structure around their due diligence, or at least you would hope that they do. So, but that's typically, I would think, the big differences.
And then, can I have each of you talk about what, I don't know, what you look for in the person that you're investing in, and what sort of team you ideally want to see in place, and then whether there's any difference there for VR companies? Like, is there some key player that needs to be there for it to work as a VR investment?
Well, I'll start, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So as an entrepreneur, I typically look for characteristics of entrepreneurship. Someone who's creative, someone who's a problem solver, someone who can solve the same problem without money that they would with money. Because often people think, and they come to us and say, if I just had this money, I could do this. And you're just like, well, that's really kind of backwards. You're really trying to solve a problem, as you alluded to before, and you have many, many resources. The resources that exist today, entrepreneurs can use to build a business, build user base, network. Networking is unbelievable. When we first started 30 years ago, you were lucky if you had 10 degrees of separation or something. Today it's like 1 degree of separation. You can get to anybody to do a deal. And so you look for these kinds of characteristics in an entrepreneur to make sure they're good problem solvers, they have good intellect, good, all the basic skills that you want to see in a person you'd interact with as a partner.
And I would add to what Greg said. The one part I would add there is that you want the person to have skin in the game,
Yes.
right? If the only risk to you is I'll go find another job, that's not fair sharing of risks. Yeah. So you have to have skin in the game. You have to have domain expertise. So whatever you're doing, whether you come at it from an industry expertise standpoint or technology expertise standpoint, there has to be some domain expertise that comes with it. And for us, we don't like parallel entrepreneurs. And different VCs have different views on it, but if you have 3 things going on, that's typically something we would stay away from. We want you to be 100% focused on what you are doing and what we are investing in, right? So that's the other thing we would look for in the team. And then the last thing I would say around that is, the team needs to kind of be really tight and together. So I always use this quote to kind of joke about the philosophy there is when Benjamin Franklin was fighting for our independence, he said, we must all hang together or we will all hang separately, right? And and that's the mindset you almost want your entrepreneurs the team to have, that it's all together, they're in it, and they will go through the downs and the ups because there will be plenty of those. Then they will be together in that function.
I also, I would echo everything you guys said, and then also I think it's important, you want to work for the guy you're investing in. Like if I want to work for the guy I'm investing in, then I'll invest in him any day of the week. That's like the biggest thing, is because also like you are working for him. If you're investing, like I'm sure you've all gotten, 2 nights ago I was up to like 3, 4 a.m. like we're building pitch decks with someone, and I'm sure you've all done that. So yeah, you want to like have great chemistry, you want to work for the guy that you're investing into. Or sorry, you want to work for the female or guy. Seriously, that was wrong of me, I'm sorry.
Good save. Actually, to that point, what I guess what would you tell entrepreneurs to expect to be getting from a person that's investing in them? Like you said you were up late making pitch decks. Is that a typical thing, or I don't know, like what level of, you know, mentorship and non-fiscal support would they be expecting?
At network.
Yeah.
I see a lot of early stage deals, and sometimes, you get these people who say, I want small money because maybe they're in a stronger position, and they got caught in the shot, see what happens. Sometimes they even a little bit, borderline arrogant. Yeah, it's okay, it takes. And it's kind of like, I tell them, listen, why do you have to, collapse the money and, the smartness, right, or the advice or whatever. If you can do it, fine, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? So money is money, take the money. If the guy gives you a check and you never hear about him again, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can always get, you can build an advisory board, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a lot of, especially VCs, some angels sometimes want to contribute, and that's fine. My experience is that they contribute in terms of networking, they help you hire, they never help, or they rarely help you get customers. If you think you're gonna get money and the guy's gonna introduce you to, your next customer or a bunch of CIOs, you're delusion. But again, there's nothing wrong with, separating the advice and the money. If it comes together, in some cases, great, all the more, all the better, that's fine.
I'm curious to hear your take on just what we've talked about some of the technological challenges that remain and adoption and all that stuff. Is there anything beyond that that you see as a challenge with the business model for VR? Are there any, I don't know, just aspects of it that haven't really been thought through yet, or that you're waiting to see how they shake out? I'm sorry, I'm going totally off script. Just asking a question.
I look at VR as a spectrum. It's from the tools to the languages to the content creation to the content itself to the sales of it, and then finally, sort of other areas. And entertainment, it always comes up. We mentioned porn and all that stuff in the last discussion, but science, education, any kind of think of visualization of any. If you look at some of the applications, there's a medical school in the Rift one. I forget what it is. It's called Body or something, and it's absolutely mind-blowing that you can now teach medicine and that kind of thing from that. So it's a whole spectrum.
And I also feel that you can't change consumer behavior, right? So when you think about VR, I mean, that's a bigger game. That's the so in some senses, I kind of like augmented reality a little bit more because of the fact that when now in some of the cars, for example, you can see the displays on the screen, the directions on the screen. It tells you, next turn right coming up on your GPS on the screen. So you're in a sense, you're bringing something from a technology standpoint where you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is watch the road and drive, and something is augmenting that. It's helping you. So instead of me changing my behavior and having to do something different, like walking down New York as an example with the big glasses, less likely to happen than something that just augments it a little bit. So we always look for things where it doesn't change the human behavior. If you go to see a movie and now you're seeing a movie in VR, that's okay. That's great. That's a behavior we are already used to. So that's just fundamentally one more thing that we can.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't alive for kind of the whole first web revolution, but last meeting, the group that we're working with, we sat down and we plotted all the influx points in VR that have happened 3 years, 4 years back, and then 3 years ahead. And there was this giant cluster right now where we are, and it is all web. And so that is like the standards and protocols of the web are being built right now. The first web VR browser came out like 9 months ago or something. And so I don't think VR will really achieve what we all want it to be until web is able to deliver the experiences. And so that is what I am totally now focused on is the web side of this. So I think that's a big opportunity that a lot of people are, there's a lot of native games and film, and you can't deliver good games and good film to the web. That's not really debatable, but all the things that you can deliver to the web that you don't need to download an application for is what excites me, and I think that's what's going to lead to scale.
So, on the Doctors Without Borders side, one of the things that we've done as a test case is for fundraising. We've sent Google Cardboard viewers out to certain groups of donors that we haven't connected with yet. And we do A/B testing to see what's the difference of experience in terms of what's the penetration rate, who picks it up, what's the retention, how long do they stay in terms of a giving donor, that kind of stuff. And we found it definitely it's a wonderful experience and it's good feedback. So kind of the comment earlier about the UN now using it to, so there's a couple of videos out there about the migrants and what's happening there. I would say this is maybe a little bit of a, going back to the economists in the 80s, Christians, that talked about kind of the influx of low-level technology and not necessarily having the big thing, but kind of this low level that will kind of exist in duality with your current web browsers. That these types of things have become immersive, that are easy to replace, that don't have a lot of kind of additional content, you're not trying to replace a movie theater yet. You're just trying to replace that little 3x5 note card size thing on your browser that you're watching a video. Seeing what's happening in the rest of the world is a really powerful experience relative to watching it in 2 dimensions. And so I see maybe these technologies coming, and that's also maybe the limitation until we get better hardware and we get a little bit more sophisticated computation.
From what I understand about Google Cardboard, if I can kind of follow on that, they're creating a specification so that anyone can print your own goggles for it. The lenses themselves are very readily available. They're very cheap, and so I guess I've heard promotions like the New York Times Magazine. How many? 1 million? A million copies of those, and so you're going to see more and more sponsored VR setups for those kinds of applications where you can enable your audience with enough to be able to experience VR in a very closed way, and then monitor it, measure it, enable it. It's mind blowing.
So, yeah, my view, our view, typically the groups I belong to is sadly pedestrian, maybe not very pioneering. We're really interested, like, when is the cash going to come in?
Well, that's actually, to that point, I feel like there's been a lot of at least media attention around the consumer applications and entertainment and all that stuff, but there are huge applications in healthcare and like less sexy, like banking and behind the scenes industry kind of things too.
I'm looking at a VR startup I was studying in Berkeley right now, and the thing that's interesting is that the cash is probably gonna come in within less than 12 months.
Yeah.
So we're not asking that it's be there today or tomorrow, but
Right.
within a reasonable period of time, reasonable for us.
Not 10 years.
Amy, can I ask a question
Yeah,
that's
go for it.
pertinent to that? So when I think of cash coming in, and I think of a market that would probably be ideal for VR or AR, is gambling. I mean, look at how the machines have gotten. They're putting 4K monitors now on them. There's the audio is there. How can VR or AR get monetized through gambling?
Are you asking me a question?
I'm asking somebody. There is. Oh, there is?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, I'd be really surprised if that's not happening.
Darn, I didn't just think of that.
Yeah, well, actually, that's an interesting, the monetization thing. We're talking about behind the scenes industry stuff. On the consumer side, it seems like it's mostly purchasing content or advertising. Have you guys seen anything other than that, that would monetize the content side?
I think there are
Selfishly,
all
I'd
these
say.
applications that we talk about where,
Yeah.
where you can do things, the flight training that was talked about, or the
Right.
doctor training, or things that you can simulate in the virtual environment.
Mhm.
Those lead to immediate monetization.
Right.
There are companies which will,
Yeah, I know just in the medical, this is a weird bit of like gross trivia, but there's a huge shortage of cadavers for medical schools, right? Huge. Like there's maybe, I don't know, 20% of schools in the country have like ready access to them for anatomy classes, because it's not like you say at the DMV that you're gonna donate your body. You have to like call the medical school and tell them, and like it's this whole process and whatever. So I've heard from a lot of medical schools that they're really interested in VR for training medical students, because up to this point, they've just been using video, in some cases 3D video, which is terrifying as a potential patient of one of these people. But they're saying that, you know, okay, with VR, we could, not only does it solve this problem, but it actually in some cases is better than the traditional method, because you don't have just one body that had a certain set of circumstances. You have, you know, any number of types of bodies that you can work on and whatever. So things like that, where it's like, it's actually really solving an existing problem in a way that's not that crazy for the people that are involved, seems like a much faster route to returns than like gaming even, or, I don't know.
And I think all the traditional ways are still open, right, in the VR AR world, right? So when you have games, you
Yeah.
know, the freemiums and, you know, all of those. I mean, we have a gaming company which is actually developing a VR game, and a lot of the things that they're intending to use for monetization is still very similar. You still buy a
Yeah.
sword, and you still buy, you know, all of that good stuff.
Is
right?
there any, do you guys have any concern about potential, like there's, right now it's fairly unregulated, the VR, at least from the content perspective, like there's some talk of a new rating system for content, but it's not really been worked out yet. There's some talk of, you know, like lots of talk, but nothing's really happened yet. Is that a risk for you from an investment standpoint, that like 2 years down the road, there could be some new regulatory framework?
I'm not investing in content, so I'm not the best person to talk on that one.
Anyone watching that?
But I think it's inevitably gonna happen, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
And I think this, if you look at it the other way, like, are there standards, right? So to that
Right.
earlier points, that's something that's almost disruptive in this
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
will eventually have standards for platforms, standards for this, standards for that, and you know, you're in the middle of this where this is a wild west right now. There's no standards around this.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think some things will come out of that, and that's when probably the regulations and other things will
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I think actually you just hit on a great question, it'd be worthwhile to hear feedback, everyone, is what the appetite is on the investment side from a content point of view versus enabling platform technology point of view.
Yeah.
Due to the longevity of that investment.
You know, and I don't speak for everybody on this panel, but for us, being in Sacramento and not having that follow-on, you know, not being able to rely on that follow-on capital, we would shy away from things that are, you know, platforms and, you know, things that would change the industry in that sense, right? There would be more applications of things because you can monetize them quicker. The platforms and things require a higher level of investment, multiple rounds, and, you know, just from our perspective, we would shy away from it.
I think you made a good point about the investing into the picks and the shovels versus the going to find the gold.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing. Like, we've done now one publishing platform that enables someone to quickly create VR from their cell phone and publish it to a headset. But I would never invest directly into content just because I don't feel like I have a good enough eye for what the general population wants. Do you guys know where those entrepreneurs should go if they want funding for content versus like a venture backable technology?
Mhm.
I'm not too familiar with all that. I know like corporations kind of.
It's a really interesting difference in both your perspective. From a venture startup looking for funding, finding the right investment group
Yeah.
because of this exact example right now.
I mean, and it's interesting, people divide it differently too, right? So there will be VR, AR groups that, you know, Don was referring to that would specialize in investing in that and things like that. Then there are people like us who are sectors, you know, who are more region specific, right? We're looking for good companies in the greater Sacramento region, right? So, you know, out here and everywhere else, and not necessarily that they're VR AR companies, right? So we will have this much depth in the technology aspect of things, but we would be very interested because you're based here, right? So so that so you can have all these different variations of how you look at that investment.
I would, this question kind of came up earlier in terms of the difference between the VC and angel groups. And I think Lokesh did a pretty good job answering it, because I think VCs typically know where their sector and their focus and kind of their remit is and where they'll go. I don't know of angel groups, unless you're kind of a more specific one like John, in terms of, if you get to the general angel groups, you get a room full of people with a large set of backgrounds, and they may not know what they are willing to fund and what they don't, but that crowd does have a known disposition if you actually sat back and looked at it and thought about it. And maybe they all like computer apps, they may all like healthcare, they may like biotech, they may like mechanical things with hydraulic cylinders and all that kind of stuff. But there will be things in that room that we'll tease out. So the job for the entrepreneur is to figure out, at the VC level it's easier because they almost publish and advertise it. At the angel groups, it's a lot harder to know which angel groups to go to and then how to play on those specialities. But they do exist.
I'll tell you a quick story. At one point in time, Zynga and the games were very popular. People would play Zynga 5 minutes and then go to work. And one of our members, so it was an inside job, was a serial entrepreneur, started a kind of like a semi-casual startup, asynchronous gaming, whatever. So we invested in that. It didn't work out. We took it back. Fine. So we went back to the old days, like we don't understand games, movies, whatever, hit-driven business. We don't do it. And I met this guy who sold one of those, I think, Farmville, young Chinese guy, to Zynga, and I met him in San Francisco, and I told him how we felt about it. He said, you guys do that because you're donkeys. You don't understand. If someone comes to me, with a game, I have such a deep understanding. I can afford to put $300,000, $400,000 in this game because I know where it's going to work or not, pretty much. So, when you create content, it depends what kind of content. If it's gaming, go to the people who understand game. And nowadays, start with the Chinese typically. VR, Chinese are also big. I'm glad to hear that there is an angel group. I didn't know that done in this area that focused on VR. But go to people who really understand the content, because as Lokesh said, you go to your general angel guy, it may just blow his head. He doesn't understand the whole thing.
Well, and also content is so subjective. I used to be in the content group at Intel, and we have meetings and meetings and meetings that range from every obscure thing to very general things, and it's a very subjective area, way to create. You can imagine somebody coming in and pitching you something. Oh, I'm going to have this application, and it's going to allow you to find little animals, and you're going to throw balls at it, and then it's going to go around the the gym and all this stuff. And you're like, thank you,
I think also on that point, it's really important, specifically in VR, is to educate investors. So we host a lot of events where they're totally free. We fund them, and it's literally just panels, exactly what we're doing right now. I think that's really important to educate the angels that might not see the same opportunity, and then after they're educated, meet the same entrepreneur in the same company and opt into that deal.
And
So
I think demos too are even more important in VR than anywhere else.
Yeah.
It does sound like science fiction.
Chris Milk from Within, which is a VR company, his quote was talking about VR is what was it? It was talking about VR is jumping. It was it's basically there's no way to talk about VR. He couldn't even think of what would be a comparison to talking ever. Forget that. Okay.
Okay, I think we're at time now. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.